All right, people, we've got a brand new tranche of Lil Durk paperwork that's just landed, and I've broken it all down. I've had a read of the new paperwork. I'm going to really try my hardest in this video to keep my opinions out of this, okay? If you followed the last couple of videos I did on the topic, I did a video basically saying that I didn't think that maybe some of the moves that Durk and them were making were really as powerful as maybe some people were making it out. A lot of people have been upset with me for sharing my opinion on this case and giving my thoughts and, maybe some instructions as to if you were creating a meal and, you were considering perhaps some ingredients were cooked. I'm not going to say that in this video. I'm just going to break it down. I'm just going to give you guys the facts. I'm really going to try and keep my opinion out of this and just let you guys determine it yourself. I do have my opinions on this. I'm going to keep them to myself in this video, right? Durk's coming home, as it's what you guys love to hear, man. Durk's coming home. They got nothing on him. And if I pull up anything in this paperwork that looks like they got something on him, we're just going to close our eyes on that, okay? We're just going to ignore it. We're going to be ignorant. We're going to just, I'm just going to try and read this objectively, all right? But I do feel like there's some stuff in here that actually is really favorable to Durk. And I do think, personally, I'm going to keep my opinions out of it. But I personally, when I read this earlier, I think there's a couple things in here that are actually not only not a good look for Durk, but also just makes me think that his legal team maybe isn't as hot as some people have said. Let's play a little game. I'm not going to point it out. I'm not going to give too much my own opinion in this one. You can spot and let me know in the comments the little segments of this where you feel like, okay, his team's actually falling a little bit short in this situation, okay? So let's get to it, man. Let's get to this paperwork, all right? So this is courtesy of Durk All Day, Durk's imaginary lawyer on Twitter. Shout out to him, man. I know he probably ain't feeling me right now. But, okay, this is the latest, all right? So this is a reply in support of the government's motion to impanel an anonymous jury. And a lot of people said I've repeated myself a lot in the last video, but, a lot of this stuff is repetitive. They're making the same points. They're hammering everything home. And essentially what's going on is the government are basically clapping back at Durk and saying, look, everything you said about why this jury shouldn't be anonymous and how you're not a threat to what's going on is absolute baloney. This is what the government is saying. They're saying that you are a danger to the jury. To request that the jury isn't anonymous, to request the jurors' names and addresses is literally putting them in danger because you OTF members are quite literally thirsty to slide and, have witnesses touched, have witnesses interfered with. Even your fans, you're sending them to interfere with witnesses. That's not me, all right? Obviously, as you know, since the last video, Durk's coming home and there's no evidence on him. So let's just look at what the government are saying in this case. And, I'm just really going to try my best, all right, to just not. But it's just, man, it's just okay, it's just, we're all right. The oven's not preheated to 400. Nobody's getting cooked, all right? Durk's coming home. He's innocent. It's all good. No one ever slid for Von either, and nobody innocent got killed. And as a society, we should just let that slide. All right, without further ado, okay, it says juror confidentiality is just one of the security measures this court should adopt to ensure a fair trial, prevent improper attempts to influence jurors, and to otherwise protect the judicial process. So what we're basically going to see in the next couple of lines, okay, because I've read through this already, so I'm going to tell you what I feel like we're seeing, and then I'll read it to you so that you know. Basically, what they're going to go on to say is that OTF are a violent gang, and they're willing to use violence against their rivals. They're basically going to say that they're already attempting to tamper with witnesses, and I believe there are going to be references to redacted and kind of secret reports that the court are privy to, but the public are not privy to, that there have already been attempts to not only tamper with witnesses, but obstruct investigations into Durk's clandestine jail communications. This isn't in there, but in my opinion, and this isn't an opinion putting anybody down, but in my opinion, I think what they're referring to is Lil Durk having the Apple Watch. Obviously, Durk's coming home and he hasn't done anything. He's never done anything wrong ever. But just in the case where he got an Apple Watch in jail, which let's pretend that never happened, even though it's allegedly happened. He's not just recording music on his Apple Watch. Perhaps he was using the Apple Watch to contact people. Perhaps some of this contacts is, unmonitored jail communications. Perhaps some of this communication might be like, oh, who's telling? What can we do about that? Perhaps, I feel like that's what they're inferring here. I'm not inferring that. I wouldn't infer that at all because Durk's coming home. But obviously it says here, okay, the defendants do not meaningfully grapple with the facts that support anonymity. Basically saying you guys aren't being upfront. e.g. the violent history of the defendants and their associates, OTF's associates, willingness to use violence against OTF and defendant banks' rivals, the witness tampering that has already occurred in this case. Okay, we're not privy to that, but there's the government is saying you've already tried to tamper with witnesses. Okay, forget about knowing where forgetting jurors' names and addresses. You're already trying to tamper with witnesses. That's what they're alleging. Of course, Durk's coming home and he hasn't done anything wrong, so perhaps this is a lie. All right, that's what you guys want to hear. So it says defendant Durk's bank's rivals, the witness tampering has already occurred in the case, and defendant Banks' contempt for the judicial process, including his obstruction of an investigation into his clandestine, unmonitored jail communications. In my opinion, I feel like that's a reference to the Apple Watch, not just the fact that he got caught with the Apple Watch, but apparently, according to this, according to the government, not me, not my opinion, not me trying to put Durk down because I have some vendetta against Durk and he's just such a bad guy that just hates Durk. Apparently, he's obstructing the investigation into his clandestine, unmonitored communications. Instead, defendants brush these aside as speculation and mischaracterization and minimize the consequences of the defendant's own words and conduct. I'm not even going to give my opinion. We're just going to keep it moving. Now, okay, this next part is interesting, right? Because what I feel like is being said here is basically saying that the opposition, and it's ironic, right? The opposition, they're literally calling them the ops. They are the ops in this case. The United States government and basically the hardworking public that don't want to be murdered by accident in a Slide for Von campaign. They're the ops to Lil Durk, who basically wants to be able to allegedly... I'm going to stop. They're just the ops, all right? On one side, you got the ops as the government that don't think that you should be able to slide for Von and just accidentally kill people that aren't involved in the situation. And then you got Lil Durk's side, who basically, they're saying Durk's done nothing wrong and just, I don't know, maybe Lil Pab just dropped down dead of a heart attack after all. This basically says that Durk's opposition failed to mention that Durk and Didi and other OTF members are basically trying already to threaten people in the trial and influence cooperating witness testimony. And I feel like the wording here is really interesting because it basically says the crux of the defendant's opposition is what it fails to contest or even mention that the defendant Banks instructs his willing associates to hunt his rivals. That defendant Banks, Wilson, and other OTF associates have already tried to influence cooperating witnesses' testimony. So they're basically saying that Durk, Didi, and other OTF associates are already trying to influence cooperating witness testimonies. Does that mean that they're... All right. Again, this isn't me saying this. I'm just going to put this out there. I'm not trying to muddy up the waters or spin this narrative any which way. But there obviously was a rumor, which I didn't think turned out to be true, that this OTF member called Jam might have been the cooperating witness. And there was a rumor that Durk's crew had actually tried to kill somebody close to him, a woman close to him. Now, there was reports that this certain woman that passed away was the woman. That actually turned out to be false, and I debunked that in a video very clearly. And I don't really get much credit for that. I actually took a body off of Durk. But again, you will never hear anybody giving me credit for that and actually disproving one of the murders that they tried to pin on him on Reddit. You'll never hear anybody talking about that. But that's not to say that there aren't still perhaps maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe there was attempts to at least get to or influence this person. Now, there's still no substantial proof that OTF Jam is actually the person who's the person cooperating in this case. Whoever it is, what is clear is that the government are making it very clear that they're saying that Durk, Didi, and OTF associates have already tried to influence cooperating witness testimony. They're basically trying to interfere with the legal process, all right? But if Durk is innocent and he's coming home and he hasn't done anything wrong and there's no evidence on him, why would he even need to do that? Of course. So maybe, this is all, it could be made up as well. I'm going to calm down, okay? Because it is actually hard to be honest about this and ignore what my eyes are seeing. But it says also that OTF affiliates and supporters have already shown their willingness to threaten those involved in this high-profile trial. And I do think, and it goes on to say that, we should have heightened security measures, keeping the jurors anonymous, etc. As a result. Now, I know some people are going to say, oh, well, Durk can't be held responsible for what these crazy OTF fans are doing. And we heard in previous paperwork that OTF fans have allegedly been calling the courthouse, threatening prosecutors, threatening judges, threatening the courthouse and the trial process in general. And it's all well and good to say, well, Durk's not part of that. That's cool, but it's like, the facts are the facts. That is going on. You can't, we can all just cover our ears and bury our heads in the sand and say Durk did nothing wrong. There's no evidence. I don't think the court is just making. I don't think the feds are just making up that somebody's calling up. I could totally believe that crazy OTF fans that got nothing to do with Durk are calling up and making threats to prosecutors. In the same way that my comments are full of people saying that I hate Durk and I'm such a bad guy and the way I'm going about this is all wrong. But I'm just being honest. And the honest truth is, Durk's got so many crazed fans that the jurors do need to be anonymous, because people that have nothing to do with Durk and OTF and are just crazed fans will potentially actually hurt jurors. Like, it's not out of the realms of possibilities that some psycho loose screw will actually go and try and kill a juror to save Lil Durk. What's that? I see the way that you guys are kind of commenting, and I can see that crazed, scary Durk energy. And low key, like, I'm not gonna lie, it makes me feel a little bit unsafe. So, maybe I should be anonymous after all of this. But anyway, as we get on to page 4, okay, we see some interesting stuff here, where basically it says that Durk's lawyers are trying to downplay the need for juror anonymity. And I'm not going to give my opinion, but the way that they're putting this across. Okay, I'm not going to give my opinion, but I feel like the way that they're putting it across, I think there is merit to the idea that, you know, it's all well and good for you to just completely downplay the need for the jurors to stay anonymous, but, like, I think just... Hang on a second. Yeah, my cat's wilding out in the other room, my bad. All right, so basically what this goes on to say is that, like, look, Durk's crew are really just downplaying the need for anonymity, and they're not really appreciating just how dangerous this is for the jury. But obviously they are going to downplay it because arguably in the eyes of the government, they are the threat. They are the reason. They are the danger, right? In the great words of Walter White, like, you are... Durk and OTF, like, you are the danger. Like, you're actually the... According to the government, you guys are the problem. So it says the defendant's attempts to isolate and downplay each of the non-exhaustive factors this court considers when evaluating the need for juror anonymity, their analysis misses the mark at each turn. So they're basically saying that everything that you guys tried to say, it's just like, no big deal. There's no reason the jury should be anonymous. It's just, you living in fairyland is basically what they're saying. They're saying, first, the defendants contend that Banks has no affiliation with organized crime and that OTF is just a record label and professional entity and nothing more. Now, a lot of people that are even following this trial, like, they're really loving to have their cake and eat it too. Everybody's saying Durk is innocent, Durk has done nothing wrong. And it's funny because, like, when I hear people say that, I've had this, like, in casual conversation with people, and I'll kind of clap back and I'll be like, oh, so you're saying, like, Durk's soft, like, he's not really a threat, like, he's got no bodies, like, he's not really about that. Like, that's what you're saying, because you're saying none of it's true. And they'll be like, no, Durk's a real one. Like, Durk's a real one. Nah, Durk's a real one. Bro, what Durk says goes. You can't have it both ways, right? It sort of almost harks at, like, the little bit of the Central C conversation where it's kind of like, look, I'm saying that the guy's not catching bodies and that's a good thing. And people are like, oh, you're trashing him, you're putting him down. But it's like, yeah, cool. But then, like, while he's out having fun making millions, Digga D, the guy that's actually in a gang that's catching bodies, is in jail. He's got all these problems. I'm just drawing a contrast between these two and the outcomes that come from it. And I think it's the same with Lil Durk. It's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, you can't be like, yo, Durk is actually the realist, and, like, he really stood on business, and he did what he's supposed to do, slid for Vaughn, all this stuff. But then you want to kind of pretend like none of this stuff's going on. And that's not me injecting my opinion into it. It's like, as it says here, you guys are saying that OTF is a record label and professional entity is nothing more. The government doesn't dispute that OTF is in part a legitimate business operation, but OTF and defendant Banks' public success doesn't contradict or undermine the material facts showing the organized nature of certain OTF associates' criminality and violence. And again, like, it would just be absurd to just be like, look, these guys, like, all these guys around him, they're catching murder, like, Didi's beating bodies and he's coming back out, and then he's becoming a really high profile figure in this organization that you say is just a legitimate record label. But, like, most legitimate businesses, the C-suite executives don't all have bodies. That's not me being biased. That's just how society works. Like, I don't think many blue chip companies, you know, S&P 500 companies, in their leadership structure, people are getting promoted based on how many bodies they have, or, like, getting respect based on the body. That's just, and that's always been the way. Everybody's like, yo, everybody in OTF's like a real one. Like, everybody in OTF's like super real. But then when it comes to it, it's like, yo, this is being presented to the public in the music as a criminal organization, and now unfortunately you're reaping the consequences of that. That's not my opinion. That's just that's what we're seeing on paper. If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't be seeing this indictment, all right? If there was nothing on anybody and this had never happened, there wouldn't be an indictment, right? A man lost his life. A man connected to Quando Rondo who had a fight with King Von. Von died. These, in the words of UK drill rapper Twin S, these bullets don't fall from the sky, all right? Like, the bullets don't just fall from the sky. Like, somebody sent this. Okay, and we're going to see some more stuff in this later on, okay? Whether you want to believe that it's not Durk and that somebody else that we've never heard of, as we heard in I think we heard in another video, people were talking about that, saying, oh, it could have just been someone else, like some other big dog in Chicago that was a real big drug dealer that was friends with King Von that sent the hit. It could have just not been Durk. And it's like, yeah, I guess. Like, got any evidence for that? Because right now we're seeing loads of evidence for Lil Durk being involved in this. But obviously he's coming home, there's no evidence. So from here, they basically point out this Stefan Mack thing. Once again, it says, indeed... Okay. Indeed, defendants do not contest that two shooters charged with murder in the Northern District of Illinois discussed payment from OTF and defendant banks following the execution of a Chicago gang member. Now, that's the Stefan Mack case, and I still think it's really interesting that this hasn't been put on Durk, because if they keep bringing up that these guys discussed receiving a payment from OTF and Durk following the murder of Stefan Mack, like, why isn't Durk being charged under murder for hire for it? But I'm not going to lie, like I wonder if that's something they're keeping up their sleeve. Maybe they're going to drop that on Durk if this prosecution doesn't go well, or maybe it will go well and they'll go, okay, let's chuck another one at him. Let's just keep solving these cases. It could be hit with a superseding indictment with numerous murder for hires in there. We really don't know at this stage. But basically, it goes on to say that OTF associates, including the defendants in this case, act on Durk's direction and with his funds to hunt and exact revenge on OTF's rivals. Again, you let me know in the comments, right? I'm going to be unbiased, but this is an interesting thing to say. At Durk's defendant Banks' direction, which, as we know, Durk is basically fighting and saying, you need to let me know how, when, and where this direction was supposedly given. But also this little extra line they've added here, and with his funds. You can't really deny that it was done with his funds. It was OTF credit cards. And a lot of people are saying they ain't got nothing. They ain't got nothing on him. You know, him saying don't book nothing in my name. That don't mean nothing. Well, okay, but everything was booked in OTF cards in your name. So Durk's coming home. They ain't got nothing on him. But like, if things were booked in his, all these strings together, like it's a combination. They're hitting him with a combination, like it's Tekken 3. Okay, they're saying it's at Durk's directions with his funds, which appears to be they've proven, and nobody's denying that. Nobody's saying, oh, no, it wasn't really his card. Like, that was actually, they thought it was an OTF card, but actually it was a completely different card. Not, like, you can't, you're all trying to say, well, Durk saying don't book it in my name could be something, blah, 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 but it's booked in his card. It's booked in his, you know, he's coming home and they don't have anything on him except for the fact that this is booked in his card. Now they're saying he had to hunt and exact revenge on rivals. Now what we're going to basically see later on is Durk and his crew are basically trying to like downplay this thing of hunting. And when we say hunt, we don't mean hunt like you know when you hunt and you go and find an animal in the desert and the jungle and you hunt them down and you find them and you point guns at them and you pull the triggers and you shoot them dead because that's your MO of what you wanted to do. Like they mean hunt. You know, they didn't end up hunting anybody in the end anyway. So it basically goes on to saying that defendants and other OTF associates have violent criminal histories, which again, that's not denied. Like, again, it's an organization. It's a record label, but it's like, it's a label where the guys who have bodies are getting the most respect. And I'm not going to put any more of my opinion onto it, but like, yeah, you know, what's the argument for that? Because like, if you've spent a few years kind of promoting anybody that's been involved in violence, that's going to look bad. I'm not trying to put my spin on it, but like all this is looking bad. Like you're going to have to answer for all of this stuff. And in a minute, we're going to look at Durk's response. And I think you're going to see it's quite interesting as far as like he answers certain things and then other things. It's like, I'm not even going to address that. Perhaps there just isn't there. Perhaps there just isn't a way. It's better to just ignore certain things than address them. So from here, right, we go on to page 5, and basically what we see in the next section is the government basically saying that Durk said that there's no risk to the jury, but the government claimed that actual interference has already occurred. We've already kind of covered this, but what's interesting is it basically says that there's information under seal that OTF members have already tried to intimidate suspected government witnesses. And the wording here is really interesting too, right? So this is a little bit, it talks about supporters You know, it demonstrates the capacity for OTF associates and all their supporters to intimidate those who might pose a risk to the liberty of OTF members, including jurors who will render a verdict. And it's all well and good to say, well, Durk's not responsible for what people do out in the streets. And it's like, yeah, that's cool, but this isn't a motion to put Durk away for life because some fan did something. This is a motion to keep the jurors anonymous so that these insane OTF fans that Durk's built up over the years can't do anything. And that is reasonable. But here it says, second, defendants proclaim that there is no risk of interference with witnesses in the judicial process. Now, you can't even, you can't really even say that, because how can you say that there's no risk of interference when your fans that you have no control over are threatening prosecutors and judges, right? So you can't even say that. You can't say, I couldn't say there's no risk of somebody sliding on Central C in my name. I can't say that there's no risk because who knows, right? And after that situation happened, I got all sorts of messages from people. I'm not even trying to, but it's like, I don't want that to happen. I wouldn't tell anybody to do that, And it's the same thing. Central C couldn't say, "Oh, there's absolutely no risk that somebody's not going to slide on Ross for him." All right, he's got all these demons around him and all this stuff allegedly, and like his manager's pissed off at me. So you can't say there's no risk. So for him to say that, it's kind of like, how can you guarantee that? And then what ends up happening here is they kind of build on that and basically they throw a few things at him, which, if you don't want to believe that it's fair that they're throwing at him, that's completely fair enough. But it's like, he's said a lot of things in the past that have come back to bite him. I shan't put my bias on it, but he did say that you can't. It's all well and good being like, oh, well, he didn't mean it. Oh, yeah, but he said it. You can't deny it. So it says defendants fail to mention the actual interference that has occurred in this case. OTF associates' threats to and intimidation of suspected government witness. See motion 11 and 12 in under seal filing detailing events. So this is under seal. We're not allowed to know this as the public. But again, he's not talking about fans. Whereas up here, right, it says OTF associates and all their supporters. So if this was referring to, it was just a random fan who threatened somebody, it would say their supporters. But this says outright, OTF associates, threats to and intimidation of suspected government witnesses. So it doesn't even say confirmed government witnesses. It doesn't say PW1, PW2. It says threats to and intimidation of suspect. So it could even be a case that somebody that isn't actually a government witness, but they got the wrong idea and they thought that it was. Somebody from OTF has gone and actually threatened and intimidated this person. Now, we don't know because it's under file. And sure, you can keep, Durk's nothing wrong. There's no evidence, and he's coming home. But they're saying that OTF associates are threatening and intimidating witnesses. This is a really bad look. And if you've done nothing wrong and there's no evidence on you, why would you need to threaten and intimidate witnesses? It doesn't make sense. And it says, and defendant Banks' contempt for the judicial process as demonstrated by his obstructive conduct at MDC, which I think obviously there's talk about this Apple Watch and what he was doing with it, but I feel like there's possibly more that was going on behind the scenes as far as this supposed conduct at MDC and him allegedly obstructing the investigation into what he was doing with his Apple Watch and other clandestine communications. The fact that this has been brought up makes me think the fact that these two things have been mentioned one after the other, OTF associates threats and intimidation of suspected government witnesses and defendant Banks' contempt for the process by his obstructive conduct at MDC, that makes me think that somebody, this is my opinion, I'm going to throw my opinion in here just once, that makes me think that somebody was threatened and it came perhaps off the back, excuse the pun, of some kind of communication from Durk on that Apple Watch. That's just what it makes it. These two things together, it's interesting. We'll find out at a later date. But then it goes on to basically clap back and it says, instead of analyzing these tangible facts, Durk claims that his explicit disdain for cooperating witnesses, I hate all rats, is immaterial to the court's analysis since unrelated public figures have purportedly made similar comments. But the totality of facts presented by the government show that the defendants and their OTF associates have just demonstrated their willingness and capability to interfere with this trial and impair the jury's fact-finding mission. Again, I'm not going to put my spin on it like Durk's cooked, but what this does tell me is that it sounds like what the government are trying to say very carefully without giving away the information that might identify this witness. These jail communications have actually been directly correlated, allegedly, to attempts to silence people who are cooperating in this case. And that Let me know in the comments what you think of that, whether you think that's something that should be just allowed in, you know, a civilized society. Quick sip of a non-alcoholic beverage there. So from here, right, it talks about kind of like media attention and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really find that interesting. But what we end up seeing here on page 5, sorry, my bad. We already went through this, right? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what we end up seeing here on page 6, here the government basically calls Durk's motion to dismiss based on the timing of the disclosure of the threats as frivolous. So it's basically saying Durk, when he was trying to say, you need to dismiss this case because you've not let us know all of the details that you've got. They're saying that's frivolous, and they'll provide a thorough response when we need to. And what I think is interesting here, and I think this is something a lot of people overlooked, and I actually overlooked this myself. Obviously, Durk's coming home and he's not ever done anything wrong. But what I think was overlooked in that previous paperwork where everybody was saying, like, Durk's killing it, like, this witness is changing his story, and that just, there's negative evidence on him now. What I think is really interesting is Durk and his team are basically saying, you need to let us know, you need to drop the case or let us know now everything that you have. And what the government is essentially saying is that, like, I think they had a deadline of, I could be getting this wrong, but I think the deadline was something around, you know, maybe it was the 19th of November, or it was, I'd have to go and look it up. But there was basically a deadline that was, you know, not for a few weeks' time, and we've still not reached that deadline now. Government are basically saying, like, we don't need to give you that information yet. We've actually got more time. We don't need to give you that information now. And the idea that you think that you can say, give us the information now or dismiss this case, that's going to work. We ain't got to do that. So sit tight. We'll give it to you when we need to give it to you. And I think, again, that even I probably drank the Kool-Aid a little bit too hard on that last paperwork when I was like, okay, like, he's really giving them an ultimatum now. Because it turns out it's like, you're not in a position to demand that. Like, you saying you need to tell us who, what, when, where he made an offer for this bounty now or dismiss the case. And the government are clapping back saying, no, we don't need to do that. Like, deadline's later. And like, nope, we don't need to do that. So that's what basically ends up happening here. It kind of says that it's more in these footnotes basically that it says this, but it says the defendants state they intend to file a motion to dismiss the indictment based on the timing of the government's disclosure of the threats to the magistrate judge and an AUSA. So they're basically saying that they want a motion to dismiss. The government haven't disclosed the threats of the timing. They don't agree with the timing that the government disclosed the threats to the magistrate judge or the district attorney, right? And it says the defendant's assertion that the government impermissibly withheld discoverable information from the defense is categorically false. To the extent that the defendants will pursue this frivolous litigation, the government will provide a thorough response at that time. And I think they made a good point in earlier paperwork where they basically said that, like, you don't get to rush us and push us to present things because somebody might flip right the day before the trial. Somebody might flip during the trial, and we have the right for that to happen. Just like if one of OTF members and Durk tries to kill one of the cooperating witnesses or does kill one of the, that's going to change everything. So the idea that you guys are going to file a motion to dismiss and say, you've got to tell us, well, everything could change at a certain point, especially when allegedly there are efforts being made to silence, intimidate, and scare witnesses into basically saying and doing stuff that they basically should be doing and stopping them from doing that. Now, later on, we also see the government kind of slapping down a claim that Durk can't influence witnesses and the juries witnesses and juries while he's in custody. And they basically reiterate that he used an Apple Watch and other people's phones to break the rules. So Durk in his previous motion basically argued, as it says here, defendant Banks also repeatedly argued he cannot be the source of a threat to jurors because he's in custody. And it says the contention ignores, 1, his own violations of MDC rules concerning his use of other inmates' pins to make calls, and his possession of and subsequent attempt to destroy a contraband Apple Watch with cellular capabilities. So they're basically saying that Durk saying, I can't be the source of a threat because I'm in custody, so I need to have the names and addresses of the jurors, is crazy, because they're saying you're secretly getting on other people's phone lines, and you've got an Apple Watch in there, and then witnesses are getting intimidated, and then you're trying to destroy the Apple Watch before the feds can even take a look at it. Like, this is all bad. This is a bad look. But he's coming home, man. He's coming home. So it basically goes on to say the fact that threats from his supporters would just Yeah, basically, my bad. It says it ignores the fact that threats from his supporters would be just as damaging to the juror and the trial itself as threats from a defendant. Any threat will undermine the trial. Preventing the leaking of jurors' personal identifying information is a paramount concern in a case where supporters have already made threats to a magistrate judge and a prosecutor. So again, we're not going to dunk on Durk here, but they're basically saying this isn't a motion to put Durk in jail for life and for him to be found guilty. This is a motion to say we need to keep the jurors anonymous. And Durk is saying, please, can I have the names and addresses of the jurors? Like, just let me have them. Like, can I just have them just for reasons? I won't do nothing. I definitely won't do nothing. I won't do nothing with an Apple Watch. You know, my fans won't do nothing. And then, like, bro, can you just let the jurors' names and faces and addresses be public? And then if the fans, bro, I ain't got no control over what the fans do. Like, what? What? Like, all the jurors got attacked by the fans and they've all been intimidated by OTF stands and now they all want to go not guilty. Like, oh, that's nothing to do with me. That is no way to deliver fair and reasonable justice. Durk deserves a fair trial. That's not a fair trial, right? If the names and addresses of the jurors are allowed to be circulated publicly, anybody that's just a Durk fan could try and intimidate them, right? And if they get the wind, all these people aren't really supposed to know anything about Durk's background and what this case is about. If they get wind of what's going on, they're all going to be in fear of their lives. Like, you know, what happened to Lil Pab could happen to them, and it's so unfortunate. What happened, the attempt to kill Quando Rondo that killed Lil Pab, who had absolutely nothing to do with that situation, that could happen in the same way. So we could have, oh, well, they're just going to try and slide and, like, kill a juror or try and kill a witness. Oh, whoops, we missed, and we just killed some kid that had nothing. Oh, well, you know, he's coming home, right? So on page, well, that's basically, okay. As far as I'm aware, like, the last thing that I actually thought was interesting here was just a final part where the government basically says that Durk can't even show why he'd be at a disadvantage by not knowing the name and address of jurors. And again, I feel like some people, like, maybe they would have heard what I just said and they're like, oh, you're just being too harsh on Durk. He's not asking for the names and addresses of the jurors. No, that's what's said here. That's what's said here. It's exactly what it said. It says the defendants do not offer a single concrete example of how they would be prejudiced by defendants and their counsel not knowing the name and home addresses of a juror or the name or address of a juror's employer. Not one of these facts goes to bias or impartiality. The parties will be provided with the juror's city and occupation, in addition to other non-identifying facts concerning the jurors, such as prior contacts with or relationships with law enforcement. There's no need for personal identifying information, particularly considering the use of a thorough jury questionnaire. Why would you want to know the names? Like, why do you want to know so much about the jurors, right? And if you've done nothing wrong, right? And you're coming home, so, like, you don't need to know the names, right? Because you ain't going to do nothing, because you're going to be found innocent. Shot by these people, they're going to find you innocent. You know, the fact they're even trying to get the names and addresses of the jurors is like, why? What are you going to do with that info? Like, why do you need that? That's suspicious. But I'll stop. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And now we're going to get onto the second piece of paperwork. It's a long video, but I think every time there's big Durk paperwork, I think it would be good for me to just dig in deep and break the whole thing down. And, you know, before you can go, oh, you're biased, blah, blah, well, we're breaking down the entire thing. I've read through the whole thing. I've picked out the relevant parts. I'm going to let you know what's going on. So this is basically Durk's reply to the government's earlier motion. Basically, this is, okay, just to give you a little bit of backstory so you understand, this is essentially like Durk's reply to the government's opposition to Durk's original motion to exclude government's proposed evidence. So Durk said he can't include that evidence. The government clapped back and said, yo, no way, and we got more stuff. This is now Durk clapping back to that. And this one is actually very, very juicy, because in this one, he clapped back at some of the more salacious claims that were made by the government. The last, I think maybe it was 3 videos ago when I did the paperwork, when I said, yo, I've been saying for ages this 2021 Blackshear shooting is connected to Lil Durk. I thought that was crazy. Now Durk is finally going to clap back at that, man, and oh my God. What we're going to see is he's coming home, right? That's all I'll say. He's definitely coming home, and there's definitely no evidence on him. And shout out to Drew Findling, because he's definitely getting a bag for writing this one up, okay? Because this one's a banger. This one's a banger. Like, some of the writing is so creative. Okay, I'm going to simmer down. Some of the writing is actually so creative on this one. It's juicy. So, all right, so let's go to page 3. So basically, okay, what we end up seeing here, in my opinion, is that Durk's team are basically saying that the government can't tell a coherent story about the murder that occurred in August 2022, the murder of Lil Pab. It's funny because it's in my he's coming home, man. He's coming home. He's coming home. The government's claim reveals the weakness of the case in chief. Without attenuated, unreliable other act evidence, the government is unable to tell a coherent story about the murder that occurred on August the 19th, 2022. Now, it, ah, I've told a coherent story about what happened that day in a video before this paperwork even dropped. You can call me the feds all you want. I would say the government has told a coherent story about what happened. And I think that is even proven because the next sentence, they basically even concede that it's like, the government can't tell a coherent story about the murder that happened on August the 19th. Just for the record, like, they said that, you know, you all flew out, like, these two flew out there on a private jet. Everybody else came out there separately. They all met. One of them went off with the OTF credit card, bought ski masks. They had two cars with, like, fake license plates. They had guns with switches. And then they stalked Quando Rondo from a dispensary and they moved all around town until they found him. They caught him at the gas station. They all jumped out. They shot it up. They killed the wrong guy and then they left. Apparently, like, maybe my definition of what a coherent story is different from what they're saying, but the fact that they kind of concede in the next line, it's unable to tell a coherent story about the murder, or at least one that encapsulates Mr. Banks. So it's like they can't tell a coherent story, and I'm like, man, like, if all of that stuff I just told you isn't a coherent story, then I need to look up the definition of coherent and story. But then they kind of concede, okay, maybe they can, but at least one that encapsulates Mr. Burke. And that's fair. Like, okay, that story I just told you about the two flights and people flying separately and then people getting bought ski masks with OTF credit cards. Okay, Lil Durk is a small part of that. And I've said it before, I feel like the fact that he flew there on a private jet and was in Los Angeles when this murder went down is very damning. But yeah, okay. He's coming home. And like, it doesn't really, it's a story that doesn't really encapsulate Mr. Banks. Okay, let's keep going from here. All right. Because there's some crazy stuff that comes up in this, honestly. And I feel like that's a fair statement to say. It's very creative writing, honestly, because it's like, really, the government can't tell a coherent. It's almost like quite smart because it's like you're unable to tell a coherent story, and then you think, I think we can, and then they say, or at least one that encapsulates Mr. Banks. And you're kind of like, okay, maybe that second one. Maybe he'll give you that second one. Like, okay, the wording's actually quite effective. I got to give him credit for that. So it basically talks about some of the case law and sort of what the standard of evidence and stuff is. And, it's not super relevant or interesting, but they're basically giving examples as to far, like, what they believe that the government needs to show. And it kind of echoes the stuff that we heard in the other paperwork. But where things really get juicy is on page 4. And this really, really is where things get very, very juicy and very crazy, because we're starting to hear he's coming home, and there's no evidence. But I tell you what, some of what you're about to read, like, you're going to be like, really? Like, okay. So Durk's lawyers basically downplay the entire motive, and they basically say that the act that the government try and use as the motive, the killing of King Von, they're saying somebody else did that. So that can't possibly be a motive for this. That can't possibly be. And this is the first time in the paperwork that we see Lul Timm mentioned. The first time ever. And incorrectly, earlier on in the trial in the paperwork, they incorrectly called King Von's death a murder. It wasn't a murder, it was a killing. It was a lawful killing. I'm really sorry. I'm really sad that things played out the way that they did. And I wish King Von was still alive so that he could have seen through all of the things that he started in music and beyond. But this is the first time that they actually mention Lul Timm, and they don't say murder either here, which I think is actually very, very honest, and I respect Durk's team for doing that. But this is actually crazy, okay? It says the government's proposed other act evidence should be excluded, and You tell me in the comments what you think of this. So the government misunderstands Mr. Banks's argument that most of the government's proposed evidence does not properly fall within the purview of Rule 404. That is not because the evidence is intrinsic. It's because the evidence is not an other act. The act that the government seeks to admit to show Mr. Banks's motive is an act that someone else committed. Specifically, Timothy Leaks, Lul Timm, first time Lul Timm gets mentioned, who shot and killed Mr. Bennett, King Von, November the 6th, 2020, outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta. Mr. Banks was not there or even in the state of Georgia at the time, so there was no act that Mr. Banks committed for the government to use as a motive-related evidence. What the government really seeks to admit is a historical fact, perhaps the fact that Mr. Leaks killed Mr. Bennett after Mr. Bennett and Quando Rondo were involved in a physical altercation, or that Mr. Bennett was killed at all. But even Mr. Bennett's death bears little meaningful relevance to the case. Comments below, man. Comments below. Can we say that King Von's death bears little meaningful relevance to this case? That's I got to give it to Durk's lawyers. That's a bold sentence to even type and submit to a court. To say that King Von's death bears little meaningful relevance to the case. But you let me know down below if this lawyer is earning his money here. It says Durk is not alleged to have ordered violence against Mr. Leaks, Lul Timm. Okay. The fact that Mr. Leaks killed Mr. Bennett in 2020 does not bear on Mr. Banks's purported motive in this case, where Mr. Leaks is not a victim. So what this is, look, he's coming home, man. There you have it. Nobody even cared that King Von was dead. No one cared. Durk wasn't even there. Why would he even care? He wasn't there. If you only care about a murder or death if you're there, and he wasn't even there. Mr. Banks wasn't even there. He wasn't even in the state of Georgia. Maybe if he was in the state of Georgia at the time, of the murder, it'd be relevant, Or if he was if there was a murder that happened in Los Angeles and he was in the state of California when that happened, comments down below. So basically it says, additionally, the government seeks to admit evidence of public pressure on Mr. Banks to slide for Von to avenge the killing of Mr. Bennett, Von, but the pressure to seek revenge for Bennett's death does not show motive in this case. What's this next sentence going to be? How? Because Mr. Banks is not charged with seeking violence against Mr. Bennett's killer. I mean, really, it's have you not a gang war? It's if you can't get the main N-word, then you better get his guys. That's what Durk said. If you can't get the main N-word, then you better get his guys. But according to his lawyer, there's no motive. Durk's not charged with seeking violence against Mr. Bennett's killer. Nothing's happened to Lul Timm. It's these things, if you said it to Durk, it would be so offensive, but now his lawyer is bringing these things out. It's when 6ix9ine goes on a rant talking about nothing's happened to Lul Timm, that's really, really considered offensive. But when Durk's lawyer is trying to put that out there to say, well, ain't nothing happened to Lul Timm, Durk he wasn't trying to slide for, no one's tried to slide for Von. No one cares about Von. He wasn't even there. She's just no one even was interested. I'm not gonna lie. Shout out to the lawyer because I feel he's saying shit that if you said to Durk's face, you would have got slapped. But he's saying it to try and basically get him out of a jam. Crazy stuff. Honestly, crazy stuff. Wild. Okay. I mean, what's crazy is he's saying that it's not relevant. Durk wasn't even there at the time, so there was no act but then he was in LA at the time, and it's Lil Pab wasn't there when Von died. Okay, but let me know what you think of this paperwork, man. I'm genuinely really interested to know what you guys think of this paperwork, because it's stuff that you would have never ever thought that Durk would want to admit to, and now we're getting to the craziest, juiciest part of this. Okay. May 2021, shooting incident in Blackshear, Georgia, man. I've been talking about this. The government suggests that a May 2021 shooting incident in Blackshear, Georgia, where Taekwon Bowman was present, perpetrated by persons unknown, is inextricably intertwined with all the charges in this case, but is also direct evidence of the stalking charge. The government admits the fact that there is no evidence which shows that Mr. Banks or any other co-defendant in this case was involved in the shooting, save for the shaky narrative of one cooperating witness who is facing a potential life sentence. Now, it's very easy for you to say, like, well, you can't believe he's facing a life sentence if he doesn't cooperate, so you can't believe anything he says. Well, that would invalidate every snitch, every cooperator ever, because you're all trying to, other than, you know, let's say I'm cooperating because somebody killed my brother and I just want to put them away and I want to do my part to see justice. But basically, anybody in the gang that flips, it's like, yeah, everybody is facing a potential life sentence. Like, that doesn't, if that's your argument, shaky narrative of one corporate, because he's facing a life sentence, that's why he's saying it. Anyone would lie and say anything to get out of a life sentence. Yeah, but that doesn't invalidate what they're saying. Like, of course people are going to try and save themselves. It doesn't invalidate, it doesn't mean it's capped, it doesn't mean it's not true. So what ends up being said next, which is interesting, it says, moreover, the 2021 shooting cannot be reasonably taken as inextricably intertwined with the alleged stalking and shooting that occurred on August the 19th, 2022 in Los Angeles, as the facts, people, and context are entirely dissimilar. And again, they go back to this thing where it's just like, oh, like, Durk wasn't there when Von died, so he would never, ever even he wouldn't even want to slide for Von. He wouldn't care to slide for Von. He wasn't there. It's got nothing to do with it. And if he did, he would only kill Lul Timm, all right? Forget when he said, if you can't catch the main one, then you better get his guys. Also forget the fact that in this incident, it is rumored that Lul Timm was actually there, all right? There's a rumor. Can't completely vouch for it, all right? But there was a rumor that Lul Timm might have been there. You know, I don't know one way or the other. But it's like, that's not here. And if the state clap back and say, well, there's a hospital report that Lul Timm actually got shot in that incident, it's like, shoot, what are you going to say then? So it cites some case law, basically to say that prior unsuccessful attempts to kill Taekwon Bowman at Mr. Banks' supposed request explain the nature of the conspiratorial relationship and the contours of the alleged murder plot in this case. But in Sarang, the defendant was charged with arson. It basically says that there's another case where, like, somebody basically tried to do different arson attempts that failed, and then they were all intertwined because they basically worked out, like, we're going to set the fire in a manner to basically, like, defeat the fire suppression systems, and they've kind of, like, worked out, like, how to do it. And it's like they're basically saying, oh, this isn't relevant, you know, this case law isn't relevant to what's going on here. It kind of seems like, you know, there was attempts to slide on Kwando, and then you can't really say they got better at it, because it's like Kwando would never got, right? Lul Timm never got. You caught a random guy that basically was just talking shit on Clubhouse. Like, that's the best you got. And then you're like, yeah, we'll take it. Like, you know, if you can't get the main one, then you better get his guys. But then Lil Durk also said, I don't want the one you got, I want the one I paid for. So I think it was one of those ones where it's like, we'll take it. And it says, the facts of the 2021 shooting incident in Blackshear, where Kwando was present, are as follows. A group of men allegedly shot at Kwando at a gas station in Georgia, 100 times from what I heard. The investigation into the shooting was conducted by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They were unable to identify any suspects. But then this is where it gets really interesting. They say that basically the informant number 2 is the only source of information for the government regarding any contacts or participants in the shooting. Now, I would love to know what statement was made by this other cooperating witness to basically say that Durk had something to do with this. It seems that this person is basically saying that somebody affiliated with OTF or Mr. Banks had something to do with this. And I just want to know, like, what was said, like, who from OTF was involved, like, even if it was a case of just, oh yeah, these random BDs in Georgia basically caught Kwando and shot at him, and like they basically said, yo, Durk, like, can you throw us some bread for this? And that even if that's the case, it's like, that's damning. But we don't know. It says further, even witness 2's statements are vague regarding the participants in this act. He named only 2 individuals, only one of whom could arguably have any affiliation with OTF or Mr. Banks, and some of whom PW1 didn't even know and could not identify. No other defendants in this case were alleged to be involved. The only similarity between the 2 acts is that it allegedly occurred at a gas station and Kwando Rondo was present. Now, I ain't gonna lie, we've seen, like, Durk's ops getting shot up at gas stations like 3 or 4 times, and then Durk himself said, you better do like Nardo said, because dudes will die for pumping gas. You got all these lyrics about, yeah, the ops don't want to stop for gas no more after these things that happen, bro. And it's just like, the only similarity between these 2 acts is that it occurred at a gas station and Kwando was present. Well, similarity plus the fact that you got a witness saying that Durk basically had a connection to this, and like OTF members were doing this as part of the conspiracy. But it's just like, okay, you can discredit. They're discredit. I mean, he's coming home. So the 2021 Black Shear shooting incident bears no unique resemblance to and has no meaningful impact on the 2022 shooting of Savai Robinson in Los Angeles. They are entirely unrelated. He's coming home, man. The evidence does not satisfy the requirements of intertwined with the facts of the case. Now, from here, okay, basically what we end up seeing, later on, all right, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of those lyrics about people getting shot at gas pumps and stuff. Yeah, see here what was really interesting about this line before, you know, when they say that Black Shear shooting has no resemblance to the 2022 shooting where Lil Pab died, it's kind of like it's got no similarities except a couple similarities, and then also like no similarities except these similarities, and then also the fact that, like, okay, in the other one, Durk flew in on a private jet and was around, and in this one, yeah, he didn't. You know, let me know, man. Let me know what you guys think of this. So later on in this paperwork, right, Durk's lawyers basically say that line where he says, "I've got them hunting you," they're saying that doesn't prove that Durk had control over people, and they basically go on to say that there's no evidence that threat was ever acted upon. And again, it's kind of like this thing of just like, so if you say that you want to have somebody killed and somebody in your enterprise should go and kill somebody, and if they don't die, it's like, oh, that doesn't prove it. But it's like, if you was actually out looking for them and you didn't find them, like, yeah, that's not proof. But then if a murder did happen eventually, it's like, this proves that he tells people to go and hunt people, and someone got hunted. Yeah, not every single person. Sometimes you go hunting, you don't catch anything, but you go hunting enough times, you're a hunter. You know what I mean? So basically, it says, text thread including the message, "I got them hunting you up." It says the government claims that this nearly unintelligible threat, it's not nearly unintelligible. Me, got them. Me, are controlling them. I am controlling them, and the control action that I am making them do is hunting. And the thing that they are hunting is you. It's like a nearly unintelligible threat. Like, it just, like, as far as the English language goes, it's like, you got them hunting you. If I said like, you know, I got them, like, let's just say like I invited my family over for dinner, and it's like, yeah, I got them eating In-N-Out in the next room. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, I got them In-N-Out. They're in there eating food. Like, I got them food. I got them in there. They're eating food. I got them. It's not, if I said like, yeah, they got themselves some food, like they're just getting some food now. So I got them hunting you. Okay, so the government claims that this nearly unintelligible threat is evidence that Mr. Banks has control over the people who are willing to act on his behalf. Even though there is no evidence that threat was ever acted upon by Mr. Banks or any other person whom he allegedly exercised control of. The government can't show that the recipient of that message was ever killed, accosted, or harmed in any way by anyone at the behest of Mr. Banks. See, sometimes it starts to feel like we're getting into these really weird word games where it's just like, you guys are just going to challenge the meaning of every single word. And I feel like I've heard people say before that, like, that's the sign of a good lawyer. Like, a lawyer will challenge the meaning of just like every single word to try and find themselves a defense. But it's like, at a certain point, it just starts to feel like nonsense. Like, I got them hunting you up. Like, cool. I got them hunting you up. I got them hunting you down. I got them hunting you left, right, and center, whatever. I got them hunting you. And it's like, the government can't show that the recipient of the message was ever killed, accosted. Maybe you gave it 2 more weeks and that person would have been killed. Lil Pab ended up getting killed. They were never hunting Lil Pab. They've messed around and accidentally shot the wrong person and killed them, which is horrible. So I do need to wrap this up soon because I've been going for a long time. But yeah, it's just like, okay, it says, through this message, the government is attempting to bolster its case with the impermissible inference that Mr. Banks is the type of person that would threaten someone else. In other words, a person with a violent character and propensity for violence. I mean, a lot of his music would tell you that too. The thing has no bearing on this case. It doesn't satisfy the requirements of the rule, and it would run afoul of Rule 403. And now, I would say in this next part, to be completely honest, This is actually one of the ones where I kind of feel like, okay, like I could actually side with Durk's lawyers a little bit here and see where they're coming from. They basically say that the government is cherry picking statements when they used this phrase "pipe it up." It says the government here cherry picked one comment from a long group text where allegedly Mr. Banks and multiple other people discussed a variety of topics. And basically they go on to say, Durk's lawyers go on to say there's another part of the convo. And this was really interesting. And I actually, on the one hand, I kind of agree with this. And on the other hand, I feel like I don't mean nothing. Durk's lawyers basically say there's another part of the conversation where members discuss a phone call where they'd apparently diffused the tension with a rival. And somebody said, just for today, choose guidance over misguidance, right? So that was down here. It said this conversation in its entirety includes a portion where the thread members discuss a phone call that seemingly diffused tensions with a rival. One portion of the conversation about a basketball game, one portion where a member writes, just for today, choose guidance over misguidance and choose humility over pride, to which others respond peace and blessings. Specifically, the text where Mr. Banks allegedly says, I'm finna pipe it up, is later clarified in another text where he says, that's all, letting y'all know I'm finna speak up. If the government believes these texts to be party admissions, then another text clarifying the meaning of Mr. Banks' alleged words should dispel any belief that I'm finna pipe it up means anything other than an intention to speak up. Additionally, with the inclusion of the greater messages, the relevance of the proposed message is nil and should be excluded. I do feel a little bit like, it's like, you know, they're saying today, choose guidance over misguidance, choose humility over pride. It's like, okay, so you didn't carry out the threat, you didn't carry out violence, you chose guidance over misguidance for one day. What about the day Lil Pab got killed? Like, did you choose misguidance and pride that day? Like, you chose, you know, you could have chose. If that's proof, if like you guys just texting and saying we're going to choose guidance over misguidance today, then it's like, okay, what about the day that an innocent man got murdered? Let me know. Let me know what you guys think. So it's interesting here as well. It talks about this voice memo from an unindicted OTF affiliate to the cooperating witness number one. It said the voice memo issue here is so unreliable that it actually cuts against the government's argument. A thorough review of the voice recording and text messages surrounding it revealed that the speaker is talking about somebody named Unk, not Mr. Banks. Like, there's only one guy. There's only one guy. You know what? I'm gonna have to do it, man. All right, this is just me giving my argument in court. Okay, Your Honor, there is absolutely no way that Lil Durk could have been referred to as an Unk, as he is clearly 33 years of age. Clearly, okay, from the government's own chart, all right, an Unk can only be qualified as somebody from the ages of 36 to 44. So Lil Durk does not qualify to be an Unk, okay? He is a big bro. He can only be referred to as a big bro, all right? He's clearly not an Unk. He is not an Unk. He's not an OG, and he's not an elder. Okay, the government's chart, the official state mandated chart. All right, from LN to elder. He's not an Unk. Okay, if it doesn't fit, if the Unk doesn't fit, you must acquit. Durk's coming home, baby. All right, Durk is coming home. Ain't no way. All right, clearly he does not qualify to be an Unk in this case. Okay, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, all right, let's basically get towards the end. So they talk about the lyrics again, and I do feel a little bit like this does get a little bit repetitive here. We've heard about this thing, and again, like, you tell me what you think of this, okay? Because Durk's coming home. It says the government's position that lyrics are party admissions by Mr. Banks underscores its own inability to grasp the nature of rap music and more broadly art. This is actually the only section where I started to feel like I think Durk's lawyers are just finessing him, because I felt like this was just a bunch of word soup. It's like, bro, you got songs about green light, go, got location, go, look on the news and see your sonny screaming, no. They're saying, bro, you don't grasp the nature of rap music and more broadly art. The government has multiple cooperating witnesses with insider knowledge, cross-country intelligence regarding the murder of Savia Robinson and all that led up to it. 20 terabytes of phone data to rely on this evidence as evidence in this case. If the government can't prove its case without the use of Durk's unreliable, fictitious, and imaginative rap lyrics, and the government has bigger problems than the subject of this motion. I can't lie, like the way this comes across is low-key, like a little bit arrogant, but it's like, it's one of those ones where it's like you're trying to convince us not to believe what we're seeing with our eyes. Like, got location, go. Green light, go. Okay. You know, you want to play us for fools. Like, and I know everybody doing this thing. The lyrics, and he recorded the lyrics seven months before. Well, why did he release the song like 4 or 5 months afterwards? And you've not really provided any actual concrete proof other than just a producer like signing his name saying, I promise. You know, if you're talking about they're willing to kill and intimidate witnesses, like what's a producer that actually likes Durk and is on the payroll gonna do? But it says the government states plainly that to the extent the defendants ascribe meaning to the defendant's lyrics that differs from the government's interpretation, that is the purpose of a jury trial. But this ignores the federal rules of evidence and the role of the court in admitting only evidence that comports with the rules and notions of justice. The government can't simply present its own subjective translation of rap lyrics to jurors, then throw its hands up and say it's for the jury to decide. The evidence is still subject to the federal rules of evidence. It basically says the government cites this case where the defendant was charged with shooting someone, wrapping the body in a blanket and dumping it in the road. And they're basically saying in that case, the Sixth Circuit properly admitted rap lyrics where the defendant rapped explicitly about killing someone, wrapping the body. See, again, it's just like, but for the government to feign similarity here is disingenuous. This isn't a case where Banks's rap lyrics explicitly depict the crime he was alleged to have committed. I've said it from the start. It's just like, it does. It's exactly. He's saying this isn't a case where the defendant's lyrics explicitly depict the crime. It's like, that is, I mean, he's coming home and there's no evidence, but it's just like, I don't beef with dudes on the net. That stuff fed years. Like, you knew you were going to get fed years. One Up I Hate from over there just got his head pierced. I'd effed up. I'd rather get revenge instead of millions. A dude asked who I killed before, like, who you working for. Told me they got an Addy. Go. Got location. Go. Green light. Go. Go. Looking on the news and see your son. You're screaming, no, no. But it's like, Your Honor, but that wasn't his son. No one's like, bro, you described the murder, and just go and watch go watch the documentary about it if you want to hear. Like, they just describe the murder over and over and over and over again. Like, the idea that his lawyer is even like trying to say this, but he's got to try. This is like the best try that they've got. But it's like, bro, like, the lyrics speak for themselves, and you know they give these examples basically, and it's just like, I don't know. Okay, I don't know. And so from here, right, it kind of goes on, it goes on to talk about this fan edit. The government's misunderstanding of this category of evidence and their reliance on fan edit videos led to the government going back to the grand jury to cure the issue and re-indict the case, which they did. In my opinion, some might say that's a misrepresentation of the facts, because all they did was basically say, look, we basically put the wrong link in here. And they never said, oh, Lil Durk sampled. Ironically, right, DJ Vlad was kind of accidentally spreading that rumor that, like, oh, they used the sample of Quando screaming no. But really, it's like Durk was mimicking the no. They used the wrong link. They screwed up. They kind of tried to clean it up later on. But Durk's lawyer's trying to grab that and be like, look, you guys are falsifying evidence. It's just like, bro, calm down. You're just being hysterical now. That's not what happened. The lyrics are the lyrics. The lyrics ain't changed, and the lyrics are damning. Got location, green light, go, go, go. Look on the news, see your son, you screaming no, no. Quando was screaming no. It's a bad look. And, rather the government seeks to admit a menagerie of snippets from various songs by Mr. Banks to paint one broader picture of him as a violent person who has his enemies killed. The government suggests the lyrics show intricate knowledge of the LA murder that only those involved likely would know, and then points to lyrics in which Mr. Banks is seemingly addressing widespread online comments, which are quite literally known to millions. I would have liked to have seen them be more specific here, because it's like they're making these sweeping statements. It's just like, let's just ignore all of this evidence, but we're not going to talk about. We're just going to say that it's got absolutely no bearing. Like, his lyrics don't depict the crime. It's like, you sure? Like, okay. And then basically it goes on to say that if the government were to admit Mr. Banks' rap lyrics as evidence against him, it would undoubtedly result in a mini-trial on the reliability of rap lyrics as used as evidence in the criminal case. Now, we did this whole song and dance in the Young Thug trial. Oh, lyrics. Oh, you can't use my art against you. You're persecuting my lyrics. It's racism. Bro, don't hop on the mic and talk about green light, location, go. Look at your news, you see your son and screaming no, no. Because I looked on the news and I saw my son Quando Rondo screaming no, no. All right. So they're talking about this mini trial. We haven't got time to determine the reliability. They're not going to do that. They're just going to decide. Just like in the Young Thug case, that didn't work. We heard all that. We heard bodies on bodies. We heard I shot it as mummy. It didn't work. All of this stuff never worked. In this trying to exclude lyrics thing, I've not really seen it used that effectively. Of course, the defense would similarly call in an expert in rap lyrics, in rap music, who will testify to the lyrics themselves, as well as the hyperbolic, imaginative, and often fictitious nature of rap music, as well as the sound engineers and writers who took part in the collaborative process of creating the music, which the government now calls criminal admissions. It's like fair. Like, let's see, man. Let's see, because you got to try. You got to try. Now they talk about the Stefan Mack murder, okay? And this was pretty crazy. And we're getting right to the end of the document now. It said Stefan Mack's homicide in Chicago on January the 27th, 2022 has nothing to do with Mr. Banks and is entirely irrelevant to these proceedings. The government's suggestion that because the alleged murderers mentioned Mr. Banks in a text message 2 weeks after the commission of the crime that somehow inculpates Mr. Banks into the Chicago place is misplaced and dangerous. Even more concerning, the government believes that an image posted by the alleged shooter in that case holding money while a Lil Durk song plays in the background is highly probative of defendant Banks' identity as the contractor for the hit on Taekwon Bowman. Quando Rondo. To be clear, the victim in the Chicago case was not Taekwon Bowman or anyone affiliated with him. Yeah, no shit. Like, he's coming home. And as Mr. Banks is one of the most widely celebrated artists from Chicago, it's commonplace that someone in Chicago would post on social media with his song in the background. That's so funny. They were like, since he's one of the most widely celebrated, and then they link to him getting the key to the city and him hosting a prayer event and selling out a concert. It's smart, like slipping that in there, just being like, yeah, little footnote, like here's him getting the keys to the city, like just all of these little things that he did, like in the lead up to this, knowing like I'm gonna catch a case because this looks bad. It's like, yo, it's finally time to pop out with those keys to the city, man. So basically, I've lost my thread. Okay, it says, moreover, the actor issue here is a text message sent and received by people who are in no way affiliated to the case. That is not an other act as contemplated by the rules of evidence to be used against Banks, a distinction the government ought to recognize. They basically conclude by saying none of the evidence proposed by the government satisfies the requirement. None of the evidence. None of it. All of it. The government's attempt to admit irrelevant evidence through Rule 404 or to evade the requirements altogether by calling it inextricably intertwined is a transparent effort to bolster its case with impermissible character evidence. The evidence should be excluded. All of the evidence should be excluded from trial. All of the evidence. King Von's death ain't had nothing. No one wanted to slide for Von. No one even was bothered. Like, no one was even in this. No one was about. No one was even in the state. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments of this new paperwork. I've given you both sides. I think there's some very bold statements made there. Obviously, Durk's coming home and there clearly is no evidence. And as Durk's lawyers are saying, we want all of this evidence that didn't exist in the first place thrown out. What do you think? What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Do you think that the judge is going to be like, yeah, man, there's no evidence. Durk's coming home. Nothing ever happened. And like, you know, is like, it's just cool. Like, you can just slide for people and hit the wrong people. That's just calm. That's cool. Or do you think, as some people have said, that Durk is actually cooked and they've got so much evidence that it's just like, bro, we don't need all of this. We're throwing everything. Like, we're throwing everything at you just to let you guys know. And like, we know you're intimidating witnesses and I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, man. You know, I got a lot of hate for the last video, before last video that I did on this topic. Nobody is going to stop me covering this, okay? I see all the hate. I see the love too, and I appreciate the support. I'm just keeping it real with you, in my opinion. Now, if I see a response to this that's really compelling, if all of the evidence, as Drew Findling is asking for all of the evidence to be thrown out, my socks will be knocked off, all right? I will be knocked out of my shoes, as many of these Lil Durk lyrics suggested, all right? And nobody's ever been knocked out of their shoes. And there's no footage on the news of people knocked out of their shoes. And there's absolutely all made up lyrics. I too, if all of the evidence is thrown out as Drew Findling is requesting, I will be certainly looking for my shoes. Because I will certainly be knocked off my shoes. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Sorry in advance for anybody that was upset by my comments. Durk is coming home. There's no evidence. As you've seen, all of the evidence you've just seen doesn't exist, and it's going to get thrown out because there's no evidence. See you soon. See you in the next video. I'm sorry. I'm dreading reading comments on this, but I'm keeping it real. I'll always keep it real. Nobody's going to stop me. I'm never going to stop uploading. I'm never, ever going to stop being honest about what's going on, even though in this video I tried to hold my tongue a little bit. It's a dub. Never happening. Never, can't stop, won't stop. See you in the next video.